hope you've got your butterbeer at the ready, because we're about to go through everything officially confirmed by the Hogwarts Legacy team over the last 15 months. And let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff in this game, but don't worry, I'm going to walk you through everything as simply as I can with timestamps down below, so you can always come back to this video or skip ahead to a topic you're quite interested in, because it's important to me not to waste your time. But what I would say is if you end up watching the whole video, you'll be fully up to speed and ready for when Hogwarts Legacy releases. And that's a good place to start, actually, because it will be releasing on next-gen consoles on February the 10th. So that will be only on PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and S. And then we'll be picking up a second release of the game for older generation consoles on the PS4 and Xbox One, which will be releasing on April the 4th. Now, the reason for this delay is because they have more developer refinement to do for the game for their older consoles. So to be crystal clear, as I know there's been a lot of ambiguity about this due to constant delays from the studio, if you want to play Hogwarts Legacy this February, you need to own a PS5 or a next-gen Xbox. And as for Nintendo Switch, you're going to have to wait until July the 25th. Now, as for the game, another question that people ask me in the comments of all the Hogwarts Legacy videos I make is if this game will have multiplayer or have any aspect of co-op. And the answer at this stage is unfortunately no. This game is a single-player, open-world, action role-playing game where we are the witch or wizard who is attending Hogwarts in the late 1800s. And I would love to see some co-op integrated into the game in the future, as I think there's some great mechanics in this game that I'm going to break down shortly for you, which I think would be perfect for it. But for now, it's just you and your game platform of choice. Now, that said, if it's a single player game, will you need an internet connection to play it? Well, yes, kind of, because those of you who have pre-ordered the physical disc deluxe edition of the game will have to install an update patch on day one, whereas those of you who have purchased the digital editions, you'll get this patch automatically integrated when you click download, so no worries there. Now, some good news straight out of the gate here. Hogwarts Legacy has emphatically confirmed that there will be no microtransactions, otherwise known as MTX, in their game. And if you don't know what that is, it's a mechanic in games that adds features or cosmetic items which you can pay for separately. It's kind of like buying a car, but if you want the sport mode feature, you're going to have to pay extra when you get behind the wheel, and thankfully there's none of that in this game. But that doesn't mean there isn't additional extras you can obtain by purchasing a specific game edition or owning a certain console. And let me walk you through all the game editions available right now and what each of them come with, because even though this info was released a couple months ago, it's incredibly confusing. So much so, Hogwarts Legacy actually apologized on Twitter about it at the time. So essentially, here we go. There's 4 editions that you should be aware of: Standard, Deluxe, Digital Deluxe, and the Collector's Edition, which each come with in-game rewards and additional content if you purchase specifically on PlayStation. Now, to be as clear as possible here, if you pre-order any of these editions ahead of its release, you will obtain the Onyx Hippogriff mount in-game, as you can see here. So look at this as the standard pre-order reward bonus for anyone or everyone who purchases. Now, as for the standard edition itself, this is just the base game plus your Onyx Hippogriff mount if you pre-order. The Digital Deluxe Edition and the Deluxe Edition come with the same benefits I'm about to list out. The only difference is that the Deluxe is the physical copy of the game and doesn't come with a cross-gen upgrade from PS4 to PS5, whereas the Digital Deluxe does. Now, if you were to pre-order any of these 2 editions, you would of course get your Hippogriff mount, but also be able to play the game 72 hours early, meaning you could log in to play the game at the stroke of midnight on February the 7th, 3 days before everyone else. Now, in these 2 editions, you also gain access to the Dark Arts pack, which comes with 1, the Dark Arts cosmetic robes, 2, a Dark Arts garrison hat with the digital edition only and not the deluxe physical edition, and 3, a Thestral mount, which is only obtainable in these editions, and 4, access to the Dark Arts Battle Arena, which is located in the Forbidden Forest and allows you to complete challenges and practice your spell slinging skills against waves and waves of enemies. Okay, so I know that's a lot, but let's go through the Collector's Edition now and then go over all the PlayStation exclusive bonuses, because in the Collector's Edition, you'll pick up everything that we've just discussed, as well as a steel bookcase to keep your game discs safe and sound, as well as a life-size floating ancient magic wand, which has to run off a plug into your house mains. There's also a Kelpie robe to use in this game, and that is the only collectible by purchasing this edition, and that's the only actual in-game item from the Collector's Edition as well. So right now, that's all of the game editions and their rewards, but if you pre-order any edition of the game that is specifically on PlayStation, you're going to get even more stuff, and let me walk you through that right now. The first reward being the famous Felix Felicis potion, otherwise known as Liquid Luck or the Luck Potion, that when consumed in game will reveal gear chests on the minimap for 1 day only. Important to note here though, it's just a recipe, so you'll actually need to gather the ingredients to make it and then brew it in your own room of requirement before you can kind of take advantage of its bonuses. PlayStation are also offering you a free Haunted Hogsmeade shop quest if you buy the game on their platform, with Avalanche Software stating that strange things await players below the Hogsmeade shop, and overcoming these challenges will reward you with a shop of your own where you can sell items and gear at better rates than anywhere else. So essentially you'll gain more gold or galleons when you sell unwanted stuff at your shop vendor compared to others in game. But not only that, hidden away in the fine print on a PlayStation blog post, you'll also pick up a shopkeeper's cosmetic outfit, which hasn't really been advertised too much, to be honest, so just know that you're going to get that as well. Now I'm sure you can understand why Hogwarts Legacy apologised on Twitter. I had to sit down for a solid hour to actually make sense of all of this, but hopefully now you know what the deal is with all of this pre-ordering, and let's move on and talk about what this game is actually all about, because according to the narrative director Moira Squire, we will be a new student that is starting Hogwarts in our 5th year, which is very unusual in the Wizarding world, going on to state further that this game is an entirely new Wizarding world that nobody has ever experienced. And this game itself takes place in the late 1800s, and while it isn't a direct adaptation of the Harry Potter books or films, it is deeply anchored in Wizarding world lore, so a lot of things you experience and see in game will be very familiar to you if you're a fan of the franchise, or even if you're not, you're going to recognise some stuff. Now, as for the underlining story, it's been left purposefully ambiguous by the studio for the last 24 months, but what is repeated time and time again is that our character is a special student who holds the key to an ancient secret that threatens to tear the whole Wizarding world apart, and we'll have to make in-game choices to how that comes about and how the game ends. Now, the reason we're so special in this game is because we're able to sense, wield and control ancient magic, which, if you didn't know, isn't your standard run-of-the-mill magic in the Wizarding world. It's actually very powerful and has been largely forgotten by that same Wizarding world. So when someone comes along who is able to harness it, they're considered very special and unique, because there is a huge potential of unlimited power in the one who can access it, which is, funnily enough, what we can do in this game, which is a really cool premise for a story. And more detail on how this mechanic actually works in game shortly, but just to give you a swift example, if you look at the blue orbs falling out of these enemies in these clips, that's actually ancient magic itself in game, as confirmed by the game director Alan Two, which only we can see and nobody else can. Now, our ancient magic abilities are also attracting some attention from the goblin Ranrock, who is in the process of instigating a rebellion against the wizards of the time due to their feeling of continued discrimination, prejudice and subjugation. In fact, this isn't the first time we've seen a goblin rebellion in the Wizarding world. The first rebellion took place in Hogsmeade in 1612, and a second took place in 1752, and a third in the 18th century, presumably not long before Hogwarts Legacy takes place, which is around approximately 1890. But it's now Ranrock's turn, and he wants to control us or use our abilities as a weapon against the Wizarding world for his own rebellion, and this is why he's teamed up with the Dark Wizards of the time, led by Victor Rookwood, who may be related to the modern day Dark Wizard, that being Augustus Rookwood, who was a Death Eater of Lord Voldemort's and was outed by Igor Karkaroff in the Goblet of Fire films, if you may remember that, subsequently being imprisoned in Azkaban. So expect to be fighting against goblins, Dark Wizards as the main antagonist here, and this leads me on to how we are going to be interacting or making choices within the story and against these antagonists, as this has been repeatedly referenced as an option to do so by the devs in interviews over the last year. Now, game director Alan Two stated that within the story, dialogue options will offer us a different variety of choices in regard to how we wish to respond, with those answers having a little bit of a butterfly effect, where those responses can genuinely affect the story and the actual ending of the game, which I honestly didn't expect at all, and is a big positive in my opinion. However, I think it's super important to note here, and referencing the Hogwarts Legacy FAQ page, this game isn't a morality system, and if you haven't come across this mechanic in games before, think of it as a simulated world judging you to be good or evil, and a good example of that actually being Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, where you can choose to be the light or dark side in quest and kind of pick one depending upon your affinity or what you want to do. So a bit of a contrasting statement here for me, but Hogwarts Legacy does add some finality to that morality question by saying we as the players will encounter various quests and storylines that will influence the witch or wizard they choose to become. So make of that what you will. And if you're enjoying the video so far or learn anything new, please do leave a very swift like down below. It really does help me out on YouTube, so thank you very much. And while you're down there, I'm also running a Hogwarts Legacy game giveaway. You just need to be a subscriber of the channel to enter, and very best of luck to you. Now, with all of this emphasis of this game being about us and our Wizarding World story, you'd hope there would be a lot of customization features we could choose from, and you'd be absolutely right. Now, before you start the game, you'll hit the character creation screen, and 6 hours later, after messing around inside it, you may actually start to play the game, because there's several initial presets to choose from here to kind of get your character into the ballpark of who you broadly want to look like. And once you've settled on that base standard, you can then move on to the next panel to personalize this further with 15 options for face shapes, 20 choices for skin color, and 3 initial glass designs to choose from, with Alan, the game director, confirming that there's a lot more glasses to collect in game, so don't just get fixated on these 3. You'll also be able to choose from 35 hair colors, 42 hairstyles, with Alan also stating that there will be a barbershop in Hogsmeade if you fancy a fresh trim later on in the game, as well as 20 freckles and moles and 10 scars and markings to kind of have a perusal over. Now, the customization doesn't stop there though, because you've got 25 eye color choices, 30 eyebrow colors, and 25 eyebrow shapes to get yourself looking fresh for that great hall Walk of Fame. Now, the final tab, and this is where you'll be able to refine how your voice sounds, the difficulty of the game, story mode being the easiest and hard being the most challenging from a gameplay perspective, and of course the name of your character and whether you want to be a witch or wizard. But what about house sorting, and can you choose your own house? Well, the answer is yes. You will be able to specifically choose your own Hogwarts house at the start of the game, but it hasn't yet been shown to us on how this actually happens. However, Warner Bros. Have implemented a cool feature which is available for you to do right now, where you can link your Wizarding World account with your Warner Bros. Account, and you can then move across your personal details after completing the online quizzes, such as your Hogwarts house and wand type, which will then be available for you in game. Now, the Patronus won't be, by the way, as recently stated on the Portkey FAQ page, but you can actually pick up some rewards for doing this whole kind of integration. And to be clear, it is entirely optional, and you don't need a Wizarding World account or a WB Games account to actually play this game. But if you fancy picking up the exclusive House Fanatic school robes to properly represent your house in the game, as well as the skull beak mask, then it may be worth doing, because it's kind of completely free. But that's not to say that if you do decide to do this, you're not locked in when you begin playing the game. And referencing that Portkey FAQ page once more, they already tell you how to actually change your robes in-game before it's even out. So let's say your account is linked and you're currently in Slytherin house, but when you get into game, you decide to be sorted into Gryffindor house, then you'll actually have the Gryffindor Fanatic robe drop into your gear section in the pause menu, and not the Slytherin robe from your WB account. And the same thing goes for the beat mask, so don't worry too much about that. What I would say is get your account linked for now to activate the rewards if you want them, because WB Game Support also confirmed on Twitter that you'll be able to change your wand in-game as well, and that's another experience they purposefully not included in their reveals so far. They're keeping it as a surprise. But apart from what we've seen from the official art, I do think it's going to be another type of ceremony, which I'm very much looking forward to. But just know that the option will be there to change it as well. And while we're on this topic of house sorting, one feature that won't be featuring in this game is the house point system, meaning you wouldn't necessarily pick up 5 points to Hufflepuff for completing a side quest with a specific professor, is my understanding. But that said, Alan, the game director, did say that it is definitely present throughout the narrative of the game, so we will see it in action, but it won't be something available to view in the menu system, or we won't be able to grind out house points in game to kind of win that house cup. Now, one thing we will be able to engage fully with though is each house common room, and it's not confirmed if we'll be able to sneak into each house, especially if it's not our own house common room or dormitory. But as noted by Boston Madsen, senior environmental artist at the studio, each common room is true to the books in their locations and details within them. Each entrance requires the correct lore dance steps to kind of enter it, and contains secrets that we'll need to rummage around in to uncover. But if I just pause it here and zoom in onto the table, you'll notice wizard chess playing there. But unfortunately, we won't be able to play wizard chess in this game due to the development time, and the same thing goes for another famous minigame called Gobstones. That's not going to be playable, but let's hope that they're added in the future update, because they just all add to that magical wizarding world immersion. And speaking of immersion, it wouldn't be Hogwarts if we did build friendships and have relationships with other students, and that will be a core mechanic of this game. As confirmed by the Hogwarts Legacy team, we will be able to talk to different students and teachers around Hogwarts who will provide us with optional side quests to complete, resulting in leveling XP, unique rewards, and even new spells to learn that we can then add to our repertoire. Chandler Wood, the community manager, stated that these optional side quests are designed to teach us some of the secrets around Hogwarts and flesh out some interesting opportunities that are hidden around the castle, which we would have perhaps kind of run past or have not necessarily come across without doing these specific quests. Now, with that in mind, some of these characters will be main storyline companions which can accompany us while we play through the main narrative game, each with their own unique abilities and stories to tell. And at present, we have 3 confirmed main storyline characters attributed to houses and have been seen in main storyline cutscenes so far. That being Sebastian Sallow of Slytherin, Natsai Onai of Gryffindor, Poppy Sweeting of Hufflepuff, with a purposeful omission of the Ravenclaw main storyline companion so far, but more on that in a second, because if we do decide to complete Seb's optional storyline, we'll be able to learn and use dark magic in the game. And according to Hogwarts Legacy, Sebastian is a charming, extroverted boy whose twin sister Anne, who I actually believe is this person from the dark magic trailer, suffers from a mysterious and debilitating curse, with Seb convinced her cure lies within the dark arts. Now, Chandler has confirmed that you can complete Seb's optional quest line and not engage in the dark arts if you don't want to. And I also want to bring your attention to this additional character on the screen from the trailer. This suggests to me we'll be able to have several companions recruited with us throughout the game, which are separate to these main storyline companions. And what I would say is think of them as second tier recruits, which is where I think our Ravenclaw companions come into play here, because Hogwarts Legacy released on Twitter a few months ago a picture of Amit Thakkar, a Ravenclaw student aspiring to be a famous wizard historian, having already planned his memoir out in full. And we've also recently picked up news of 2 more Ravenclaw classmates being announced in game, that being Everett Clopton, played by Harry Potter actor Luke Youngblood, who was Lee Jordan in the films, and we've also got Mahindra Pelwan, who will be played by Asif Ali. So my thinking here is these are recruitable Ravenclaw classmates that bring different abilities to the table that we can utilise in game, and I would place them in the category of technically being companions, but not a main story companion like Seb or Natsai Onai. And let's talk about her now, because she's described as being a quick-witted Gryffindor who has the need to seek justice. She grew up in Africa, where she attended the school of Wagadu, which is the largest wizarding school in the world comparatively to the other 11, but moved over to Scotland with her mother, Professor Onai of Divination, at the behest of Deputy Headmistress Matilda Weasley. And I'll be breaking all these professors down next, so don't worry about that. But what I would say about Natsai is we've seen her storyline quest contain several clips of the Hippogriff High Wing, which we can only assume is her main quest line. Now, the reason I mention this is Chandler Wood did confirm on Twitter that the Hippogriff mount becomes available in the game following a certain quest, where that Onyx Hippogriff mount will then be available to use once the ability to ride the Hippogriff mount is unlocked in the game. And I think this quest here is exactly what Chandler was talking about. So by completing her quest line, we'll gain access to this type of mount, but let's just wait and see. Now, that said, when it comes to Poppy Sweeting, she's described by Avalanche as a bright and compassionate girl with extensive knowledge of magical creatures and a particular aversion to poachers. She's in Hufflepuff House, and the studio have also confirmed that the poachers are hunting magical creatures across the Highlands and will remain a constant threat to us. And I think this is where Poppy's questline takes place, as we'll follow her into the Forbidden Forest and beyond, engaging with magical creatures such as a centaur herd, as you can see here from this clip, amongst other beasts which we can save from the poachers and then bring back into our vivarium, into the Room of Requirement. But before we do explore that mechanic in detail, let's go over how classes work, as well as the professors we know of so far in the game, because it's a big question that has been asked by the community over the last year, and that is, how do classes work within this game? What do we do to actually partake in them? Well, Alan too, the game director, confirmed that these classes we attend haven't been built in a simulation kind of way, going on to explain further that even though there will be a day and night cycle in game, we won't be required to attend classes at certain times of that day, but rather these classes are built within the main storyline. He said the best way to think about this in classes as a whole is in a narrative sense and within chapters of a story. With each chapter there will be different missions and side quests for us to complete before we progress on to the next chapter, but once we do move forward, those quests or classes will no longer be available for us to experience. Now, that said, there are mandatory classes we'll need to attend, but that's only because they fit within the main storyline and will teach us some core spells we'll need for the game. There's also optional side quest classes which appear on our map in certain chapters, and if we choose to do them, they'll teach us new spells as well as help us build a relationship with the professors, which will have a ripple effect later on in the main storyline and potentially benefit us in some way. Now that's a solid segue onto professors and the classes they teach, and let's start with Charms class, and that will be taught by Professor Ronan, who is a Slytherin and considers his students' friendships and extracurricular activities to be as important of the subject of charms. He enjoys games and incorporates that into his teaching, which is what we can see going on here in this clip with the Accio spell. Next up we have Professor Dinah Hecate, who is a likeable Ravenclaw but stern and takes her teaching responsibilities seriously. It seems that this is the class where we'll be learning how to duel one another and learn specific jinxes and defensive charms, as you'd expect. But interestingly, she also used to work in the Department of Mysteries in the Ministry of Magic, which is the department that researches the ancient magic phenomenon which we discussed earlier and happen to be very proficient in, so it's no coincidence there, I think. Now, our herbology professor is Maribel Garlick, who is a Hufflepuff that was born and raised in London, growing up in a household of muggles. She's one of the students' favourite teachers and has an incredible passion for growing anything to do with magical plants, as you may expect. So if you want to utilise this style of gameplay in the game, don't miss the optional herbology side classes that pop up on your map. And I'd say the same thing for potions, as Professor Aesop Shah is a Slytherin and ex-Aura who was very successful at catching dark wizards until he picked up an injury that forced him from the field. He then took up his role as the potions master at Hogwarts and enjoys teaching students who take genuine pride in potions but doesn't suffer any flaws of any kind. So essentially, don't mess up the potion making when you see a choice screen just like this. Now, as stated by Hogwarts Legacy, those are the main classes and their respective professors. However, they have mentioned in the State of Play showcase that there will be a beast class as well as a broom training class, because we can hear this being spoken in the trailer as well.
In Beasts class, you will learn about a variety of magical beasts you might encounter, both at school and as you explore the world surrounding the castle and its grounds.
But not only that, the studio recently announced Deputy Headmistress Professor Matilda Weasley, who will be the one responsible for helping us getting acquainted with the school initially and handing us our in-game field guide, which we'll go over shortly. She's also been confirmed as our Transfiguration teacher, so a nice nod to Professor McGonagall, I think. We also have Professor Onai, who will be teaching divination, Natsai Onai's mother, of course, as well as Professor Satyavati Shah, who will be teaching astronomy. We can also see Professor Cuthbert Binns teaching a history of magic in this clip here, and that leaves ancient runes, which potentially could be taught by Professor Elazar Fig, who we've been already told actually by the developers will be teaming up with throughout the story to uncover this Wizarding World ancient magic secret. And even though he won't be teaching us anything per se from what we know so far, apart from not being like him as a person, we have the headmaster, Professor Phineas Nigellus Black, who will be played by Simon Pegg, as you can hear from this new clip. Take a listen.
You call that a shine on those boots? Do better.
Now, according to Simon, he will continually try to get in our way and cause issues, so avoid the headmaster at all costs. But I'll tell you what you don't want to be avoiding, and that is the Room of Requirement, which will be playing a massive role in this game. And I'm going to break down this walkthrough into three parts: customization and personalization as the first section, gear and upgrades as the second, and beast care as our third. Now, we already know that Professor Weasley will be introducing us to this Room of Requirement early on in the game, and the House Elf Deke will be showing us around one of the several vivariums in the menagerie section of each Room of Requirement. But customization, the best way I can describe this is to think of playing a Hogwarts Sims game, because you're able to change the architecture to a specific theme you prefer, like the ceiling for example, or you can actually conjure objects in your own space, like a specific rug you like the look of, as well as change its colour, size and position in the room. These items are called conjurations in game, and you can purchase specific items like this chair from tombs and scrolls in Hogsmeade. But that's not the only way you can obtain cool looking furniture or statues for your room. You'll also be able to pick them up as rewards for completing side quests and finding hidden vendors around the world. Additionally, you can also change the look, colour and feel of your main plant potting and potion stations, taking that customization even further to make it look truly unique so you can show off to your friends. Now, you can't make all of these changes for free though. As you can see, if we just zoom in here on this particular part of the screen, each change costs Moonstone as a currency, which, as confirmed by Alan 2, you'll be able to collect as a resource and a reward just by playing the game. So it's not a super rare material that could potentially cause an annoying grinding session by the sounds of it, which I think is pretty good. Now, for gears and upgrades, when you obtain a new piece of gear out in the wild, you won't know exactly what it is or what the stats are as soon as it hits your inventory. But to find this out, if it's actually worth your time and worth equipping, you'll need to run it through your identification station, which is one of the first things you conjure in the Room of Requirement. We don't see it directly in action from the recent showcase, but after interacting with it, it will reveal all the stats and upgrade level on the item. We can then head over to our Loom station, which then allows us to apply traits and upgrade that piece of gear, which will grant us greater statistical advantage or provide us with specific abilities that blend in nicely to your preferred game style or perhaps a location you plan to visit. So for example, we can add a trait to our jumper here, which will decrease damage against trolls, which will be super useful if we're going mountain troll hunting. Now there's also 3 upgrade levels for each piece of gear that you need to be aware of, and using the Snowy Owl Scarf as an example here, if we upgrade to level 1, we'll pick up an increase in +4 defense, which will reduce our damage taken from enemies, and then if we wanted to upgrade it again, that would push it up to a +12 defense, and so on. And you may have also noticed the difference in color coding on some of these pieces of gear, and if you haven't played these types of games before, this is visually an easy way or a cue to identify the quality of the gear quite quickly in terms of performance and quality within your inventory. And we actually have a piece of gear here which is green, and that's usually the entry level, but it isn't shown directly in the trailer. Nevertheless, the next level up from that is usually blue, which is called Superb in this game, followed by Extraordinary, which is purple, which is usually called Epic, and then finally Orange, which is Legendary. So the end goal here is to get all of the legendary pieces of gear equipped for yourself, for your witch or wizard, if you do want to maximise all abilities in the game, as that quality of gear will offer the best stats for you. Now on top of all that, Alan went on to say that transmog will be a confirmed feature in this game as well, which essentially means that you can equip the best performing gear in the game, but then hide it all with a preferred robe you want to wear. So hypothetically, you can have the most insane wizard legendary gear in the game stat-wise equipped, but it could look absolutely horrific visually. So you could utilise this transmog mechanic and equip your Hogwarts Christmas jumper while you run around Avada Kedavraing your enemies, which I'm going to tell you right now, I shall be doing. So that's customization and gear explained. So let's go through beast care, because it's another big mechanic at play here within the Room of Requirement. But as mentioned, Deke the House Elf will be showing us the ropes initially in the vivarium, which is this greenhouse looking doorway here, with Mackenzie Toner, the systems designer at Avalanche, stating that we will be unlocking more vivariums as we progress through the game for different creatures, including a swampland. So don't just think you're going to be restricted to this lovely green meadow, because if I bring you back to the State of Play trailer last year, I think that was in March, we can just about catch a glimpse of a couple more vivariums here, so expect to see them in game. But back to our meadow, because this is where we'll be bringing our magical creatures initially, and beasts that we've saved from the enemy poachers in the Overlands location in game. Now Mackenzie went on to explain further that this is their home and we'll be able to build relationships with them. In fact, you can name them if you want to, which I think is a really nice touch, but this mechanic does have a deeper purpose than just naming pets, because you'll notice these 2 tabs at the top of the screen when approaching a creature. Now the love heart on the left lights up green when you pet your creature or play games with him or her by summoning the toy box, but the knife and fork tab on the right is of course turned green when you feed them, and after both of these tabs go green, they'll feel safe enough to provide you with certain resources which you can then use for crafting back at the loom we just discussed, such as Niffler fur or Mooncalf fur. Now you don't have to return each time into the vivarium to pet and feed these creatures if you don't want to, as you can unlock and summon food troughs and keep the toy box out to make this happen quite consistently, but initially you will have to build a bond with them before these unlocks do become available in game. You can also customize this area just like the Room of Requirement, such as conjuring in a huge ruined archway, as you can see here, so another Sims inspired area to build something special for your animals if you're that way inclined. And I do think this is a great segue onto going through all of the magical creatures and beasts that we'll come across in the game that have been confirmed so far, and then we'll go through exploration together. And let's start with house elves and goblins, because even though they're not fantastic beasts, they're going to be featuring heavily in the game due to the Goblin Rebellion we discussed earlier, and with access to the Hogwarts kitchens, I'm sure we won't be short of interacting with house elves asking for food. Now, as for magical creatures, there is a dark magic corruption which has been mentioned by the studio a few times, but it hasn't been explored further at this stage. All we know is there are some creatures in the game that have been corrupted by a magical force that links into the main storyline, which is why it hasn't actually been elaborated upon, because they don't want to give too much away. So if you do see some creatures which look like this giant toad that is clearly infected with this corruption, they're not going to be particularly friendly. But that said, I will tell you what will be friendly if you manage to pull off the correct dance moves, and that's hippogriffs, because if you want to tame one, you'll need to keep eye contact, approach slowly, and offer them up the respect they demand by bowing to them whilst waiting for them to respond. Now, if they do respond positively, you can hop on and off you go, just like Harry did in the films. But if they do respond negatively, well, that is another story entirely, and I do hope this mechanic is included in the game if we get it wrong. Now, speaking of fly mounts, we've got another one here. It's the Thestral, and you can only ride this one if you order that digital deluxe edition. You can't get it any other way, but they do seem to be appearing here as a general creature in game, or perhaps one that you can kind of tame and bring back into your vivarium. They are a breed of winged horse with a skeletal body, reptilian features, with big leathery wings that are noted as resembling bats. They're native to the British Isles and Ireland, and as Hagrid puts it, Hogwarts has a whole herd of them in here. Now, here's the catch with Thestrals: you can only see them if you've seen someone die. So it will be interesting to know from a story perspective if we do meet Thestrals early on in the game after arriving at Hogwarts, which begs the question, if we do, who have we seen die? But Thestrals aside, we also have mooncalves here, which only appear at a full moon, and if you do collect their dung or poo before sunrise and then apply it to your plants, it'll cause them to grow super fast. So I'm definitely expecting to see that mechanic in game, especially as we already have a fertilizer in our room of requirement. Now, as for Graphorns, it's another creature that we've seen a lot of throughout all of the promotional material released so far, with Avalanche confirming it will be a rideable ground mount in game. Now, poachers love hunting Graphorns because from a lore point of view, their horns offer magical properties when grinded down into powder. So expect to come across a cutscene involving the two here. Now, next up, we've got Nifflers, which will be in the game, which is superb. They're native to Britain and are often kept by goblins and curse breakers who use them to bury deep into the earth looking for treasure, bypassing all magical protection enchantments, but they also can be incredibly destructive and not great pets. So I hope we can use them in game to search for treasure. I think that would be a great animation to watch. But let's move on to Whoopers from this artwork and the few clips that have been shown to us. They are brightly coloured African birds that eventually drive the listener to insanity if you do listen to them for too long, and I wonder if we'll be able to use them in a similar way to the mandrake plant, as you can see in action here. But more on plant mechanics shortly, because what about owls? Can we have them as pets? Well, the Hogwarts Legacy team haven't officially confirmed that, but heavily hinted at it, because in the showcase before Christmas, we can see two different types of owl perched in the Hufflepuff dormitory next to our bed, implying that we can kind of customise or switch out our owl, or perhaps purchase a new one at Hogsmeade. There's also an owl post option in the pause menu, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is some sort of daily quest mechanic where we're sent contracts or mini quests to complete as an incentive to log back into play every day. They also recently showed the owlry building, so I'm confident there will be a pet option in the same capacity as a Kneasel, which we've also seen in the most recent gameplay showcase, as confirmed by Mackenzie Toner. Now, Kneasels are cat-like creatures which are incredibly intelligent, independent, and occasionally aggressive to those it deems suspicious with ulterior motives, just like Crookshanks from the movies. So more potential pet evidence here, but no news on toads so far. So sorry, you Trevor fans. But what about phoenixes? Will they be in the game? Well, I think so, yes, because if we zoom in on this official Vivarium wallpaper, we can see what looks to be a phoenix flying over our house. Now, Fawkes is also believed to be alive at this time, famously being Dumbledore's companion, so it would be awesome to have him as a companion in the game. And whilst I'm on this topic, I do discuss this a bit further in detail in this Hogwarts Legacy achievement video, where Epic Games mistakenly put all of the game's achievements online a few weeks ago. So I'll link that at the end of this video if you want the full breakdown on phoenixes and a lot more stuff. I just don't want to spoil it here. But that said, some of you may not be pleased to know that spiders will be featuring heavily in the game, and my first thought was that they were the acromantulas in the Forbidden Forest, which is a giant magical species of spider that's native to the rainforests of Southeast Asia, where it predominantly resides in jungles. Incidentally, they're believed to be a wizard-bred species designed to guard treasure hoards, which plays nicely into this open world RPG game here. Problem is though, there's no official record canonically of acromantulas in Britain around the 1800s, so lore-wise, it's improbable for a colony to exist in the game. However, we could have some creative freedom here. They could have been introduced to the forest and then killed off when Aragog arrived, which would be totally fine by me. Now, mountain trolls are another big boy opponent we'll be up against. Some solid callbacks to the Philosopher's Stone here, and I do wonder if we'll get a similar Easter egg like this in-game. I would love to see it. Now, dragons, we've been shown them several times over the last 24 months, and this type of dragon specifically is a Hebridean black, which is noted as having rough scales, brilliant purple eyes, razor-sharp ridges on its back, and an arrow-shaped spiked tail. It's also widely considered to be much more aggressive than its Welsh counterpart, that being the common Welsh green dragon, which, by the way, are the only two native dragons to the British Isles that we currently know of. And it would be cool to see both in game, as Dragonhide is imbued with that ancient magic we discussed earlier, which I think we can kind of see here if we just pause it and zoom in. And this plays really well into our storyline, so expect to see a lot of dragons is what I would say. But speaking of storyline, and as discussed briefly earlier, we will be encountering centaurs in the game who do live in herds from approximately 10 to 50 and are predominantly forest dwelling. There's a known colony in the Forbidden Forest, so I'm assuming this is where we come across them in game with Poppy. And I'll tell you what else seems to be coming across a lot of, and that's Infrahi, which is a corpse that has been reanimated by a dark wizard spell. It's not alive, but merely used as a puppet to do the wizard's bidding. And Dumbledore said to Harry famously in the Half-Blood Prince that they fear light and warmth, fire in particular, and we can see from the reveal that fire spells such as an Incendio would be a perfect offense and defense against them in game, but I reckon we'll be able to summon them, well, at least I hope so, if we're going to be dabbling so much with the dark arts. I think that would really subvert expectations of this game, and I'm here for it. Now, sticking on dark creatures, we've got Dementors. Will they be in the game? Well, we did see them in the initial reveal trailer over 2 years ago in the wizard prison Azkaban, but nothing has been shown since, and a lot can change since that reveal was actually made. Now, of course, to dispel these Dementors, you'll need to summon a Patronus, and regarding the info we went through earlier by linking our Hogwarts accounts to our WB accounts, shows that the Patronus is not being transferred over in-game, unlike the House and Wand choices. So I don't think we're going to be able to cast unique animals, even if we can actually cast a Patronus, but if we can, I think it will just be a corporeal mist. But let's also wait and see on that front. Now let's go over exploration, because there's a huge amount that's been hidden away and also shown to us so far. Now, Alan 2, the game director, has stated that the map is massive, but to explore it, you'll first need to complete the introduction at Hogwarts, and when that's finished, it'll become apparent really quickly when the game opens up, and then you can go wherever you want. Now, we still don't have a full map picture yet, apart from this concept art in the behind-the-scenes trailer from last year, and the Argyll, Scotland county map shown briefly in the first gameplay preview before Christmas, so it's a waiting game on that front until we see the full map. But mini-map wise, this is in the bottom left-hand corner and assists you in nearby vicinity-based quests, challenges, collectibles, and points of interest. However, if you want the full immersive experience, Alan says that this can be turned off in the settings, so you can explore everything without being prompted to do so in the corner of your left eye. Now, as for the actual design of the game, senior artist Boston Madsen said that Hogwarts has been designed from the ground up as a huge hub, with certain areas very similar to the layout of the Grand Central train station or King's Cross train station, to help players avoid being lost and kind of be signposted in a way. A further example of this being the main hall, or the main hub, which has a section with large green stained glass with a tree stenciled upon it, clearly identifying that this is the direction you need to go for the greenery and by extension your herbology class. So expect lots of subtle visual hints like this in Hogwarts and beyond to keep you going in the right direction, even on a subconscious level. Now, a question I see asked a lot in the comment sections is about the seasonal weather changes. Day day and night cycles, and how long is this actual game taking place for? And what I mean by that is, does it run for one school year, one school term, or is it two, or in fact is it perhaps even longer? Well, as confirmed by Alan again, day and night cycles don't just turn your screen dark and light depending upon where you are or where you're playing in the story. NPCs and characters actually respond to specific times of the day, with more people going about their business in the castle during the day and being a lot more quieter at night, as you'd kind of expect. And the same social routines are applied across the map, including Hogsmeade, just like in real life. Incidentally, Alan said there will be certain times and world interactions that are restricted by these day and nighttime cycles, so you could only start a quest, interact with a door, or loot something in particular during a specific time of the day. So there's lots of secrets to discover due to this mechanic, which would otherwise be easily missed. Now, as for seasonal changes, Boston did say that as the seasons progress throughout the year, environments will change to fit that time of year. As we can see here on our hippogriff, we transition from the summer or spring to winter, and the same will happen at Hogwarts, which is a sentient castle, and the windows decide to change themselves from summer-styled windows to winter ones as it transitions through the seasons. But how long is this game then? Well, Alan said this in the most recent gameplay showcase. I'm actually going to let him say it himself, and then we'll talk about it.
And you're really feeling that passage of time while you're a student, going through your year at Hogwarts.
And notice how he says going through your year. So that confirms to me that this game takes place for one full calendar school year with 4 seasons as narrative markers or chapters, which Alan also goes on to confirm. And this might seem obvious, but there's been a lot of speculation about how long this game is over the last several months. But with the map so huge, with its ever-changing seasons, running around on foot will take an extremely long time to do, and that's where mounts come in, specifically brooms, and there's a mechanic at play here which is worth knowing. First and foremost, after completing the broom training class, you'll be able to summon a broom anywhere outside and land wherever you want. That said, Alan says we'll need to keep a close eye on the turbo meter in the bottom right hand corner, as it will deplete your speed if you go too high into the sky, but will be completely maxed out if you fly close to the ground, which will generate max speed of your broomstick. Now, Mackenzie explained this flying mechanic further by stating that the sporting goods shop in Hogsmeade sells a variety of different brooms which are purely cosmetic, but if you do talk to the shopkeep and complete a quest he offers you, he'll then sell you upgrades which you can apply to your broom to improve this turbo meter, meaning you can fly higher for longer and at a greater speed. But what about Quidditch? Well, unfortunately, there's no Quidditch in this game, which is really gutting, as I loved the Quidditch World Cup game back in the day, but I do hope that they add this in future updates with a multiplayer aspect, especially with graphics like this. I think it could be fantastic. But let's move on to movement on the ground, because we're able to jump. That has already been confirmed, which suggests parkour and climbing will be a part of our movement in the game. But what about swimming? Because there's huge amounts of bodies of water dotted all around the Scottish landscape, loads of lochs to explore, and the Black Lake. Well, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but I do think it would be a big miss not to have that in this game, but I'm sure we'll know that sooner rather than later. But that said, if you don't want to run, jump or fly anywhere, you can just utilise the fast travel flu network, which allows us to transport ourselves to different locations around the map if we've already discovered that specific location on foot. Now, there doesn't seem to be any interaction needed for them to be added to the network, because as we've seen multiple times throughout the trailer and other showcases, just running past them will prompt a notification to pop up, which is very welcome. But I'll tell you what is also very welcome, and that's some iconic locations being included in this game, such as the Great Hall, the Clock Tower, Hospital Wing, Castle Kitchens, the Restricted Library, and the Prefect's Bathroom. We've also got the village of Hogsmeade, which we discussed earlier, which is the only all-wizarding village in Britain, where you'll be able to visit several famous shops like Zonko's Joke Shop, where you can purchase items using galleon sickles and your canats or canoots to prank students with. But Hogsmeade isn't the only place you'll find vendors and wizard kind. Hamlets are smaller villages dotted around the Scottish Highlands that will offer us puzzles, secrets, world side quests, and loot, as noted by Alan in the gameplay showcase. And this is where we'll also find dungeons and vaults with what the Hogwarts Legacy team describes as containing untold rewards. So expect some decent gear and loot for completing these challenging linear dungeons. And I also want to mention that Alan did state that we may come across Merlin puzzles and runes hidden in the distance in the Highlands, islands, which I think are these cairn stones shown in the summer ASMR video, because Alan says that when you get close, there will be opportunities to expand your ancient magic through these Merlin puzzles, which sounds very encouraging indeed. And speaking of encouraging, that's how I feel when it comes to how combat works in this game. And let me walk you through how it all works now, starting with what the developers call basic shots. This is a general damage, kind of like a auto attack feature you use until your main spells come off cooldown. It's pretty simple to activate. All you need to do is tap the R2 button bumper on your controller and you'll start dishing out some generic magic damage. But I want to bring your attention to what the developers call the spell diamond here. You'll notice that when the R2 button is pressed and held, the diamond expands with each one of the 4 spells overlapped with one of your controller face buttons, and in this case that's X, square, triangle and circle. And in its simplest form, what this means is you need to hold down the R2 button and press a face button to cast a spell. And whilst you're waiting for the cooldown on that spell you just cast, you can then revert to your basic shots by tapping R2. There's more here though, because the colour coding around these spells matter a great deal when it comes to fighting enemies and not just target dummies. And let's take an example from the gameplay here. One of the students has a purple Protego shield charm active, and the only way we can break her defences to cause her damage is we'll need to use a purple coloured spell against her, which in this case happens to be the Accio spell shown here on our spell diamond. Now after we cast that Accio spell, her defences come down and we can start doing some significant damage to her to win the duel. So in essence, to help us, the players, understand which spell we need to use to remove our opponent's defences, we'll need to reference the colour of our spells that subsequently match up with our enemy's shield indicator. Now the caveat to this is that some enemies may have the same colour shields with your spell on cooldown, so what you'll have to do is rotate your attention to other targets in the interim by flicking the R3 analog stick and deflecting incoming spells by pressing the triangle button on your controller. You'll know when an incoming spell is about to hit you in the face thanks to the Spidey sense animation that appears above your head, as you can see here. And there's an offensive trick Alan did mention in the gameplay preview when it comes to defense, where if your reactions are good enough and you hold the triangle button instead of just pressing it before the spell reaches you, your character will deflect the jinx and send back a stunning spell, which is a great tip to remember for combat. Now there's even more to this spell diamond and a distinction between different types of spells in this game, which I'm going to walk you through, because Alan calls these 2 types of spells essential and slottable, with the latter being spells like Accio, Stupefy and Avada Kedavra all placed in the spell diamond by us, and essential spells being environmental spells that are binded to the controller at all times, so you just can't move them around at all, and they're used for general gameplay functionality, and I'll give you an example of what he means. So when our character walks up to a floating field guide page, otherwise known as a lore page or collectible, which is located outside the Hufflepuff common room in this example, we can use the Revelio spell by pressing the left D-pad button, which will reveal the secret hidden in plain sight. Now in my opinion, this is really good gameplay design, because you don't want these environmental spells, which have a great amount of utility, taking up precious space in your 4-slot diamond wheel when you're in a duel. And that's just it. Can we bind more than just 4 spells at one time whilst we play this game? Well, thankfully, the answer is yes. We can actually have 4 spell diamonds, which means we can bind 16 slottable spells into these diamond wheels in the bottom right-hand corner while we play through this game. Incidentally, that doesn't mean there's only 16 spells to obtain in the game, as Alan did confirm there's over 20 slottable spells in the whole game. So you're going to have to pick and choose which ones you want in your spell wheels and how they complement your own game style for quick and easy access. But with that said, how do you access those other 12 spells from the front-facing 4 that you've already got locked in? Well, quite simply, you'll need to hold that R2 button as if you were going to cast a slottable spell. And if we just zoom in further into this section of the screen, you'll notice a small D-pad icon pop up. Well, by holding R2 and then pressing one of the D-pad arrow buttons, that will then change to another one of your 4 spell diamonds, so you can then access those spells on that diamond that you've then locked in. But I should say, you won't get 16 spell slots, which is those 4 diamonds, as soon as you start the game. In fact, you'll only start with 1, so 4 slots or 4 spells, and then you'll need to unlock other spell diamonds and other spells by playing through the game, which Alan did confirm. So right then, that's how combat and your spell diamond works, but what about this L1 button across the other side of the screen? Well, this is called the tool wheel by the developers, where we'll be able to activate in-game consumables and allies that are able to give us a boost or provide support when we're in a bit of a tight spot. And you can activate this by holding that L1 button, and when you do so, time pauses in-game, allowing you to pick one of 8 consumables that you've slotted into this menu screen. Of course, you can only do that after you actually unlock them, as you're not going to start this game with all 8 tool wheel slots unlocked. Now, thanks to some teasers from the Hogwarts Legacy team over the last several months, I've got a list of potions and plants that will fit into this tool wheel, with Mackenzie stating that each equip to this wheel should be considered as a prior investment before you head out of the grounds, so you can defeat opponents faster. Now, the first one is the Rock Skin Potion, which covers your skin in rocky material to help reduce incoming melee damage taken, which is perfect against hard-hitting enemy trolls. The next is the Wiggenweld Potion, which increases your overall health for a short time, your health bar being that lovely green section on your screen right here. And we also have the Focus Potion, which speeds up the cooldown of your spells, meaning you don't have to wait so long to one-shot Avada Kedavra enemies, and I'll be walking you through Dark Magic shortly. Next up is the Edorus Potion, which increases the effect of your deflect ability, meaning that it will knock back enemies instantly, so you don't need to hold triangle, which we discussed earlier, to send back a stunning spell, and I reckon this could be really overpowered in the game with several enemies attacking you at once. Now, as for plants, we have 3 here that you can activate. We've got the Chinese Chomping Cabbage, which attacks and distracts nearby enemies, as well as the Venomous Tentacula, which shoots acid at all nearby enemies like a turret when you do decide to deploy it. And finally, we have our Mandrakes, shown in the State of Play trailer last year, which interrupts and incapacitates all enemies in the vicinity for a short time, including yourself, as you have to remain stationary. I reckon this would be a good tactic to stop a troll charge in its tracks if timed correctly. Now, let's move away from this tool wheel and head over to this blue bar that sits above our health bar, because it's quite special and you're going to be using it a lot, because Alan, the game director, confirmed that this is the ancient magic meter, and as you build up combos in combat, which basically means that your spells hit enemies consistently and you don't get hit yourself, and if you manage to get yourself into a bit of a groove, this blue meter will slowly fill up, as you can see here, and when one of those bars is filled, you'll be able to press that L1 and R1 button together whilst focusing on one target, which will essentially one-shot them with a unique ancient magic spell. You'll also notice lots of R1 buttons dotted around the environment when you're in combat, and Alan confirmed that this is also a passive use of ancient magic, where you'll throw objects towards your enemies as an additional environmental maneuver, which doesn't cost you any ancient magic juice per se. And those blue orbs that you see on the ground, which I mentioned earlier, those are those ancient magic juice pots that fall out of enemies after dealing some decent combo damage, so pick them up as soon as you can, as it's going to give you a significant boost to your meter, so you can have fun utilising all the creative ancient magic finisher spells. And one final note about this mechanic before we move on to each spell you can cast in this game: Alan did state that as we progress through the game, we'll unlock new ancient magic powers, so there's a lot more interesting finishing moves to come, which does sound great. Now, I'll tell you what else sounds and looks great, and it's all of these confirmed spells you can cast in game, and I'm going to power through each one now for you, starting with Accio, which is the summoning charm that allows us to bring an item in question right to our feet or hands, as well as people in the game. We also have the Depulsal charm, which sends the target away from the caster, otherwise known as the banishing spell, and it certainly looks to be the case here, as we see it used multiple times throughout the showcase and the State of Play trailer. Next up is Lumos, which is another bread and butter spell that we've been using in our spell diamond, or what we've seen to be used quite a lot so far. It is the one lightning charm that conjures light at the end of your wand, funnily enough, and gives you visibility in the darkest or dimly lit areas. This will be a very useful tool when we go dungeon running. And we've also got Reparo here, which is another spell that has been consistently shown throughout all of the Harry Potter games over the last decade. It's a mending charm that could completely restore a broken object that worked on most materials, and also depended on the proficiency of the wizard. We of course now have Revelio, as we discussed earlier, one of our essential spells, which is the left button on the D-pad that will reveal concealed objects, messages, passageways, and hidden markings throughout the game. And I think I'll probably be sprinting through the castle, spamming this button just to find all the secret passageways. Now, another crowd favourite here is the Expelliarmus charm, which I'm sure you've heard of before. It was considered Harry Potter's signature move, as it allowed you to remove objects from your opponent's hand, and was considered an excellent offensive and defensive option option for duelist. In this case, we see our character knock the great sword out of the suit of armor's hands, which I think is a great animation. And speaking of these suits of armor, if we just rewind the footage here, you can hear the character shout Leviosa, so give this a listen. Now this is the levitation charm that makes objects fly, so a solid defensive and offensive option for you here as well. But what about stealth? Is that a possibility or an option in this game? Well, the answer is yes, and it's the disillusionment charm is what you're going to be after. It's a spell that disguises the caster or the target to blend into its surroundings, and as stated by Chandler Wood, the community manager, in a PlayStation blog post, we'll be able to take a stealthier approach by finishing off enemies whilst utilising the disillusionment charm. And speaking of which, Hogwarts teased the disillusionment chest a few months ago on their socials, with this chest having a huge eye in the middle of it, which says to me the only way we're going to be able to open this chest to get the loot inside is approaching it while the charm is active. So a cool potential mechanic there. But as for the takedown spell we see here, that's Trivicus Totalis, which is a body binding curse that paralyzes the opponent and knocks them out of action for a while. Perfect for a quick stealthy getaway, which you could also say the same about the Stupefy stunning spell, which has the potential to halt enemies in their tracks, which is iconic for its red coloured projectile and renders your opponent unconscious if it's fired off with some concentration and conviction. But to deflect it though, you'll need to use your shield charm Protego, which we discussed earlier as well, and you'll know this is active in game because of its orb-like design, so you'll need to smash through it with the right spell to get at the enemy, or cast it on yourself at the right time to absorb an incoming missile. And speaking of missiles, we've got the Apocno Jinx in action here, which was a spell that directed an object or individual to attack the target in question. Hermione famously using this spell to conjure a flock of canaries, who she then instructed to go and attack Ron, and you can hear this spell and see the spell yelled out several times in the showcases so far. The same goes for the Descendo spell, which is an incantation that makes objects or people, in this case, fall down and move towards the ground at high speed, which, as you can see, the target actually bounces off the ground and then returns into the air with this temporary floating mechanic, giving you a little bit more time or opening the door for further spell combos against them. Now, another offensive spell you may want to use is the Defindo charm, which is used to make precise, accurate cuts, and by the looks of things, we'll be able to use this against enemies in the game thanks to a recent duelist feat or challenge located in the right hand corner of the screen. And it's pretty brutal actually, because it could cause death if there's real intent behind it, and that's absolutely the case as well for this next spell, which is Confringo, which is otherwise known as the blasting spell that causes targets to explode with fire, which I will be using repeatedly throughout my playthrough. And the same could also be said for Incendio, otherwise known as the fire making charm, and this is where it differs from the Confringo spell, as it's intended not for blasting people in the face with a fire explosion, but rather for setting things alight, which we can see in action in this recent clip posted by Hogwarts Legacy on Twitter. Now, what about some ice cold spells to counter the fire? Well, we have them as well in the game in the form of the Glacier's charm, which freezes our enemy on the ground with the ice building to a crescendo that then explodes, blowing back enemies and dealing damage to everyone in the vicinity. So looking pretty strong. But that said, nothing compares to the Killing Curse, that of course being Avada Kedavra, which will be castable in-game against all types of enemies, so we've been told. It's one of the 3 unforgivable curses in the game that will allow you to one-shot any enemy if the parameters for its casting are met, meaning you can't just ping off a Killing Curse at the headmaster during breakfast. But Alan 2, the game director, said that they wanted to stay as close to the lore as possible, which is why it's an instant kill and doesn't just take off 75% of the enemy's health bar. But that's also why there's a substantial cooldown timer on the spell, and I counted 45 seconds of that in the gameplay that was shown to us. Now, Alan also said that there's a talent in the Dark Magic talent tree that allows you to place curses on enemies, which is what you can see here with the green X. But what that does is then links all the enemies together in one health pool, and if you were then to cast the Killing Curse, you then kill them all in one shot, which is an awesome gameplay mechanic and adds a lot of depth to the game, which I like to see and hear. Now, as for the Cruciatus Curse, otherwise known as the Torture Curse, that's in this game as well, and it disables the enemy who wriggles around in pain and does ongoing damage to them until the curse is complete. And I've got no doubt there's going to be some of you watching this and thinking, I shall be performing this curse on as many people as possible. But if the Cruciatus Curse isn't your thing, you could always cast the Imperious Curse, which forces enemies to fight as if they were your companion, and whilst they are under your control, they take reduced damage from other enemies to prolong their allegiance to you. It also curses the victim, which is that green X you keep seeing, which means that they also take extra damage. Now, there's also these ancient magic finishing moves, which we we've already discussed earlier in the video, so let's go ahead and move on to this field guide menu and the talent trees. Now this field guide will be playing a very important role throughout the game, as how it's introduced is a book which is on loan from the Ministry of Magic that helps us as a 5th year at Hogwarts get up to speed with all of the years that we've missed so far. And from a mechanical point of view, it is our pause menu, so just think of this as a hub of operations for anything that you want to look at in game. Now at the top you have your current level with the map tab, quests, outpost and in-game settings to the right, as well as the gear tab, infantry, talents and the collections tab to your left. Now the gear tab is where you'll equip or transmog all of your outfits, and it will act as your in-game loadout. The infantry tab though contains all of your items, crafting materials, potions and sellable junk we loot throughout our Hogwarts journey that you can view easily. And that talents menu we'll come back to in just a second, because the collection tab is essentially our codex of interesting facts and lore pages we obtain through our playthrough. A good example of this is picking up that field guide page that we discussed earlier outside the Hufflepuff common room, which awards us with some XP and tells us an interesting lore fact about how to enter the common room according to J.K. Rowling's writings. This is then added to our collection menu, but also to our challenge menu, which is this big tab at the bottom of your screen. And if we just jump in and take a closer look, it has added that lore page to the field guide page challenges. Now there's also some other tabs here which all contain specific challenges in game that we'll be able to complete, from combat, quests, exploration and the room of requirement, which will reward us with XP and some unique items which you can't otherwise get without completing these challenges, according to Alan. You can actually see some of these dueling feat challenges pop up on the screen when in combat, and as Chandler Wood puts it, encourages you to try out different styles of combat gameplay and use other options available to you which you may have overlooked, and you kind of get some XP as a reward for doing so. Now coming out of challenges, the map and quest tabs I think are pretty self-explanatory as far as the game goes, but as for settings, we recently picked up some official info from the team about the PC specs, with the game being able to run at 60 FPS at 4K. For consoles though, the official line is that the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S will run at 30 FPS in this fidelity mode, with a performance mode that targets 60 FPS, but they haven't confirmed if it's stable around that metric. I do hope we do get a solid 60 FPS on consoles, as this game looks beautiful, but we are just going to have to wait and see on that front. Now as for the talents, we were teased with this menu back in the State of Play trailer last year, with the tabs of stealth, core and the room of requirement being shown to us, and the other two remaining a bit of a mystery. And I think they're either going to be dark magic or the ancient magic talent tree. But as far as how this system works, whenever you level up in game, which you do so by earning XP as you can see here, each level will grant you 1 talent point to spend in a certain talent tree to enhance the certain type of spells you like to play with, making them more effective and enjoyable. Alan goes on to say that we should think of these talent trees as potential fantasies, where you can create a build that is full dark arts, just like Voldemort, or you can spend your talent points and significantly improve your spells that are orientated around defense against the dark arts, kind of like an aura, or you can invest all your points into the plants and potion trees to spec yourself into a player who likes maximizing consumables and companions for extra damage. So there's lots of options here, which is great, and as Alan says, it's up to you whether you want to play with preparation, on the fly, or with deliberation. Now the official Hogwarts Legacy art book recently teased online with some wonderful concept art and pictures and tips for the game. It's definitely worth looking through if you're interested in purchasing this yourself, so I'll leave a link down below. And if you're watching this far, I just want to say thank you. This video took a crazy amount of time to make, and I hope it's been an enjoyable and informative watch for you. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing, as I'll be covering the whole game in detail, so there will be a lot more videos like this to come. And speaking of which, check out this other video on your screen right now where I break down all of the Hogwarts Legacy achievements that were accidentally posted online by Epic Games, which does shed a lot of light on some awesome information to come in this game. So hopefully see you there in just a second. And my additional thanks to those of you who support me in the Reloads Club via a YouTube membership, as well as a huge thank you to Nika, Kev and Dennis for helping me research this video. Butterbeer is on them, and I'll see you in that next video.